Good morning, Peter Goertz. I'm a psychiatrist. Can I become a doctor and maybe later a psychiatrist? You may be asking yourself. I get a good amount of questions on this YouTube channel from people who question their ability to do that. That could be, let's say, someone who's a little bit older, in their 30s, wants to become a psychiatrist, someone who suffers with anxiety, someone who's very sensitive, someone who may have bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. So there are people with a lot of challenges, but that, in my opinion, does not necessarily mean they cannot become a psychiatrist or become a doctor, which you have to become first anyway. What you do have to do in order to become a doctor is to be willing to study a lot, memorize a lot, and spend time doing that. You're going to spend a significant amount of time studying, memorizing. However, there are ways of being pretty efficient when you're studying. One thing that's very important if you want to become a doctor is that you really want it. So that is maybe the most important thing, that you're really motivated. And what people might see as challenges, let's say anxiety, sensitivity, whatever it may be, age, pretty much any of those challenges, in my opinion, can have a silver lining. So let's say, I've given this example before, a psychiatrist whom I worked with had bipolar disorder and was even taken to the emergency room of the hospital where we worked. But he was an excellent psychiatrist, and after being taken to the emergency room, 2 months later, he was back at work. So these things really can have a silver lining. And what motivated me most probably to become a doctor was I couldn't think of anything else that was more interesting. That was really the bottom line. So I just thought that's the most interesting thing anyone can do. So that did motivate me to persist and keep going and study, etc. Now, about myself, as a teenager, I was frustrated, depressed, angry. The way I wore my hair, the clothes I wore, made me look like what other people might have seen as a juvenile delinquent. And I remember talking to a friend of mine in high school, and we used to play guitar together, and I told him I wanted to go to medical school. He thought it was a joke. He started laughing. And, you know, that may happen to you, that type of thing. People may think, oh my God, she wants to be a doctor, he wants to be a doctor. Try your best not to let that dissuade you from that path if you're motivated, if that's what you really want. And even later in medical school, I remember once in the building where I lived, I was in an elevator, and because of the way I looked, a woman just, when she walked into the elevator, she just gasped. And another situation, when I was on an internal medicine rotation in medical school, that was my first day on that rotation. I was sitting with the doctor on that ward, the one in charge of the ward. And then the doctor above her, he might have been in charge of internal medicine period, or at least part of internal medicine. He walked onto the ward, just ignored me. I was sitting there with the other doctor, and told that doctor, he does not look like a doctor. Send him home, tell him to get a haircut and come back tomorrow. So things like that can happen. On the other side of the coin, in medical school, when I was, as a medical student, on a psychiatric ward rotating, a psychotic patient told me when he saw my haircut, oh, I can tell by your haircut that I can trust you. A very paranoid patient. Anyway, so another aspect that helped me was growing up. I spent quite a few years when I was young in Nassau, Bahamas, and again, quite a few years in Germany. So very different societies, different people, different customs. And I think that's helped me in my career as a psychiatrist, have understanding for different perspectives, So bottom line, we're all unique. Each person is unique. We all have our unique challenges. And again, pretty much, in my opinion, every challenge can have a silver lining. What might have helped me looking back to navigate all this better might have been psychotherapy as a teenager in my early 20s, but it actually didn't really occur to me at that point. It wasn't something in that society that was very common. But in hindsight, I think that might have been very helpful. Thank you very much.